Ladies and gentlemen, I'll start that again. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be back on stage and joined by the fabulous Laurie Wade. We just had to actually check who was who. We look the same on that screen, Laurie.
It does.
Anyway, it's a pleasure to be back here. I hope you're enjoying the morning session, and it's good to be back and get underway with this fireside chat. And I thought to begin with, Laurie, if possible, can you please tell us a bit about what your role entails and also the IC data strategy and focus?
Okay, definitely happy to be here. This is my first time in Dubai, so I'm very excited. Got in last night, so I was happy that we didn't go too much later in the day on this. So my role, I'm the Chief Data Officer for the U.S. intelligence community, and that's a relatively new role considered to a lot of the other roles that are in the intelligence community. The Chief Data Officer, when I started doing this about 2.5 years ago, all of the 18 intelligence community elements, or agencies, if you will, did not even have a named CDO. And so when I came into this position, one of the things I wanted to make sure I did was elevate that role across the intelligence community, and that each of the 18 elements designated a chief data officer, which now I can say they have. And this is very good news because I run the council where all 18 element CDOs participate in. And with that, we have the intelligence community data strategy that was released in 2023. And it's our role as the chief data officers across the intelligence community, and my role, to make sure that we're driving that data interoperability and the data standards and the data strategy implementation across the 18 elements. And this is very critical, as we've heard from the other panels today, that without quality data, it's very difficult to do AI at speed and scale. And so that focus, that foundational focus on getting our data to a place where it needs to be, is a very critical part of the data strategy. There's a couple of points. Having me here at this event and being able to talk openly about this is another unique part of the IC data strategy. When I put the strategy together, I made sure that it was unclassified or open, so it's available on the internet through the Office of the Director of National Intelligence website to be able to read and see what we are concerned about. And there's really, it's a quick read, it's 8 pages. I didn't need a lot of pages to tell what we needed to be focused on. And I wanted to create the sense of urgency around it, so it goes to 2025. We're already working on the next data strategy, but I wanted to have some urgency around 4 focus areas. End-to-end data management, and we'll get into that in a little bit. The second goal, really in the focus area, is on getting data AI ready, which is a lot of what we're talking about here. The third one, which is something else that we'll get into and really representative of this entire event, is the idea of partnerships. And partnerships in a new and innovative way from how the U.S. intelligence community and government has worked with our partners in the past. And by partners, I mean with between the public and the private sector, and between liaison, academic partners, and how do we do that in a way that we are advancing and evolving how we view data and digital innovation, and work together in that way. And then the fourth one, of course, we've talked a lot about here, is just how do we get to a data-driven intelligence community workforce. So really focus on the workforce. So that's what I'm driving on right now, is and across the 18 IC U.S. intelligence community elements.
Well, thank you. It's our pleasure to have you here in Dubai, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy your time. I hope you get some downtime to see some of our fabulous city. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. So architecting for data quality and interoperability has become significantly more critical with the availability of several platforms. You know, these technologies have great appeal, but from a CDO perspective, what are the potential pitfalls for implementing and then scaling them?
I was happy to hear this morning in the opening remarks when we talk about Dubai's focus on deploying AI. That is what I'm interested in as well for across the intelligence community, how are we going to implement, how are we going to deploy AI in a way that helps drive out the focus of getting data across, a distributed ecosystem, right, of 18 very different agencies and elements. How do we get to a place where we can scale analytics? And we need to be able to do that at speed, scale, and securely. And so I think the focus on the glitzy and all the technology and AI and everything that we've talked about here and everything we're here to talk about, especially with, if you think about AI and Web3 and large language models, a lot of people talk about that. They talk about frontier models now. I'm very interested in those working, right? And the focus and shift from that system-centric paradigm to a data-centric focus. The intelligence community in the US, I like to tell folks, I like to tell people who work in the intelligence community, we're a data organization, right? So people want to talk about data as a strategic asset. Well, it's only a strategic asset if it's managed well. Otherwise, it's a liability. And so when we start thinking about that, the pitfalls, if we get too focused on the far end of thinking about just the innovation and the new technologies and not focused on what are the foundational elements that we have to have in place to get there, like quality data, infrastructure, power and compute we've talked a great deal about. But unless we're investing in that part of it, which a lot of people don't want to talk about, right? They don't want to talk about, cleansing our data, conditioning our data, tagging and labeling our data, ontologies, all the things that are going to make data interoperable across a distributed ecosystem where you have very siloed data. Then anything that we put on top of that from an AI capability is really building that on top of a Jenga. And we need to make sure that we avoid that. We need to be working and investing on the foundational elements while we're also in parallel looking at how we are going to innovate and building out for the innovation and the infrastructure and everything else.
From a national security perspective, what are the best practices for protecting and securing data? How do you see this space evolving, I guess, in terms of also being able to include international partnerships?
I think this is an interesting question and one that we have to think about. And this is where the rigor of which I'm putting on data management and end-to-end data management. So from the collection and acquisition of data all the way through, and for a government intel community, we are governed, right, by statutes and laws, and we have to focus on our national values. All those things have to be considered. And then also there are laws on retention policies of data, and there's also disposition of data. So we have to think about it all the way through. Now, this may appear slow to others, but I'm trying to bring speed to that if we know what all of those are, and we all have them. We've heard them here today. We heard them from the banking industry. We heard it from the healthcare industry. We certainly all have intellectual capital. If you're in the private sector, we all care about our reputation, of our, safety and security of our citizens and countries. So all of those things are known, and a lot of them are documented. So I would refer to that as these are the handling instructions. So in a digital environment, so as we look at something running through AI, for example, or even across Web3, new platforms and new technologies that are going to be coming, where data ownership, data privacy, data protections, all of those things are really brought to a forefront. All of that handling instructions, everything we care about from securing our data, and all those handling instructions that we know exist, we can turn those into machine readable labels, right? Attributes, put that on and tag our data that way, right? So that when it goes through these systems, we have that provenance and lineage all the way through, but we know the data is protecting itself, right? And so from a cybersecurity standpoint, they talk about why are we doing cybersecurity? for the crown jewels of the data that we own and have. So let's make sure that we've taken as much attention to marking and tagging our data in a way that once it gets automated, then it carries that all the way throughout. And that's something that we don't take the time to do, right? We have a lot of data sitting around, and that's where it becomes a liability as well, right? Because if it's not tagged and labeled, and it's not collected or acquired for a specific use, then most likely we're not unlocking the value and insight from that data. And so by looking at it and being very rigorous about the data management, then we can have those protections put onto the data, and then it allows us to free data for sharing with other partners, right? Because if we have the interoperability, then we can agree, here's how we want to handle this data, and this data, and it will follow it throughout its life cycle.
Are you going to get the reciprocal, thought process though from those interchanges?
I think we have, and we are starting to see when we have those discussions, right? It's more, if this is how we have to protect our data, and this is how we want to use the data, and we agree, and if there are agreements up front, then it's just, you have to then turn that into machine readable, you have to put that onto the data. Otherwise, it's always a back and forth, right? And that's where you don't get speed and scale that way, right?
As the CDO for the US intelligence community, what have been some of the more notable challenges that you have experienced in terms of the transformation, related to both public and private sector? This is where you tell us all your secrets.
Yes, that's where the secrets come out. Get your notepads out. There's a lot of challenges, if you can imagine, to this role. And I think I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge that today, right, is the anniversary of the terrorist attack on America.
23 years.
23 years. We don't want to talk about that part of it because we both were sharing our stories about that time.
It's giving away our ages.
That's right.
Let's move on.
But I think it's, and I thought about this on the ride, on the plane ride here, because one of the things that we could take away from that around the data challenge, and one that we still continue to try to overcome, right, is that you have 18 intelligence community agencies, and each one of them have their own unique data. They have their own autonomy over their authorities. They certainly were built to share data within their own constructs and not necessarily across. And then you have just the system-centric approach to how their systems and infrastructures were set up. And so now after in the years since then, everything that we've been trying to do, and there's been great success, right? And breaking down some of those barriers and thinking about how we architect for data quality, but also how we architect for interoperability across those. There's a lot of work that we've put into that.
Is there a model for that then now?
Yes, and so so through the data strategy, we also developed an intelligence community directive on data management. This is where we work. I talk about the digital C-suite. So I work with our CIOs, our CISOs, the new chief AI officers, and we look across that full life cycle. And we're just about to finalize here in the next month. I'll be signing out the intelligence community data reference architecture. And that is where we're really looking at, we're using data mesh principles as a data management approach. And that's important because what we're interested in is at the level of where we want to do that sharing and have the interoperability is at that semantic layer. And so this data reference architecture is going to be our roadmap for how we bring all of that together, from how we're architecting for quality data, how then the infrastructure and compute and all the everything we need is there, and then how are we deploying AI at scale, because that's what we're interested in.
So this conversation has been pretty different from the previous panels we've seen today, and coming from it from a data perspective. But one thing I would like to know, and that has come up on other panels, was we talk about the speed of the technology and how it's advancing. How are you and the intelligence sphere and industry keeping up with it, or keeping ahead of it, I guess?
I think this is an interesting one for a government entity like we are, because we also work in budget cycles that are difficult and to navigate. And one of the things that I think we're focused on is how do we innovate and modernize all of the processes around it. Like we have our acquisition process, right? We work with the cloud service providers. This is a good segue back to the IC data strategy and the national intelligence strategy, is the focus on partnerships. And how do we look at working with the private sector and liaison and other partners on how do we move forward and work in a different way, like with the private sector. So everyone here who's in the exhibitor hall, how do we not just think of them as vendors, but how do we look at these large use cases? I refer to them as mission challenges. How do we look at those and innovate together and collaborate and learn and share what we're doing to see how we might advance quickly and at speed? And that's one of the other things that we're doing. I talk about identifying these use cases and then doing real mission sprints. So taking a real challenge that we have in across the community, and if there's something that's cross-cutting, how do we attack that and work that together?
You mentioned the challenges, so I want to flip that and talk about opportunities now. And with predictions that the internet may reach maturity by 2028, what from a CDO perspective prevents our greatest opportunity?
I could not be more excited about Web3, and the advances that it will bring. Because one of the things as a chief data officer and as a data organization, the ultimate goal, right, is the discoverability, the accessibility, and the sharing of data across. And if you look at what can come from Web3, the idea of, just the speed at which we have the latency, like in nanos, right? And then data ownership, data privacy, all of the things that it will provide us. I think the lowering the barrier of entry, yeah, right, for individuals across the globe to work together in ways that we haven't worked in the past. I think there's a lot of opportunity. Now I have colleagues who might think, oh gosh, these things are all scary for us, but I think there's a great opportunity space because we have large volumes of data. We need to share and work together on that, and we need to be able to scale analytics quickly, and we need to use the technology. It's no longer just that we have the volumes of data, but how do we get the right data to the right people at the right time, and how do we collaborate and communicate and operate at speed, scale, and securely. And I think that these technologies, and these, especially with Web3 and other technologies to come, and immersive technology, it gives us great opportunity that we need to be thinking about how are we doing all of that. So we have the opportunity space there, but then I really have to bring it back to making sure that the foundation is there. And the foundation that I care most about is how are we getting quality data?
Someone who's worked across the industry for many years, if you could go back and tell yourself as you were starting out in this career, the best thing that you've learned now, what advice would you give yourself?
Myself? Well, because I push pretty hard on all these points about what we're trying to get done. But I think I would have, go back in time, and I think there's been such a focus on we focus a lot on the collection and acquisition of data and the analysis of the data, and really not understanding and really emphasizing that point that we are a data organization, and that the fact that we didn't do the planning we don't spend that time. Nobody wants to really talk about the plumbing, I call it, right? But this opportunity now that we're in, we have to do that foundation. We have to have that there if we want all of this to work in a way. And I think it's important as we do it. For us, we have an explainability factor, right? We have to do it in a national security context. And all of those things can be done, but we have to plan for it, we have to prioritize, and we have to make sure that we have that we're working collectively to see where we need to be when all of that technology and all that infrastructure and all that compute and everything comes into play. We have to be working on this other part. And so I think just pressing harder on that in the early days would have probably been better. But I'm here now, and that's I'm very excited because I think there's great opportunity for us to do this.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Lori Wade.
Thank you.